Whatever flies around, there is something wrong.
Could you say something very quickly? One of the things I always remember you talking about was when you'd be at a cocktail party and the subject would come up with UFOs and you sat with one on the ground for 45 minutes and you'd bite your tongue. What was that like?
It was difficult. But you know, in some ways there was some kind of satisfaction involved there. And they're talking about stuff, the what if, and I knew.
My name is James Peniston, United States Air Force retired. In 1980, I was assigned to the largest tactical fighter wing in the Air Force at the time. I was stationed at RAF Woodbridge, England. Shortly after midnight on the 26th of December 1980, Staff Sergeant Steffens briefed me that some lights were seen in Rendlesham Forest, just outside the back gate. He informed me that whatever he seen didn't crash. He told me it landed. I then ordered Airman Kabanzak, A1C Burroughs, to respond with me off-site.
That night, we were on Security 1, which was in charge of mobile security for the Woodbridge base, and we responded to Jim Burroughs' sighting of something out on the edge of the flight line.
The controller on the radio broadcast over the air that go down and check out a possible UFO.
There was a craft of some sort that was sitting just inside the tree line.
When we arrived to the suspected crash site, it quickly became apparent that we were not dealing with a plane crash, or for that matter, anything else we've ever responded to.
Burroughs would say to Jim Peniston, "Do you see that? Do you see what's out there at the edge of the trees?"
It was just bright lights, you know, and the only way you can describe it is, I guess you'd call it an object.
At that point in time, 3 of us had direct observation of the craft.
I then asked Airman Kabanzak to relay the radio transmissions back to our control center. Burroughs and I proceeded towards the craft.
The only noise we heard out in the woods was the noise of the animals.
Just as Burroughs and I entered the tree line, the shape of the craft was defined. The closer we got, the more the white light dissipated, but what appeared was a triangular craft. When we approached it, it was, I say it measured probably about 9 feet long, maybe 6 feet high, a little higher, maybe 6.5 feet. The lighting emanated from the fabric of the craft, and it would actually move around. I mean, it would move. You'd have different locations where maybe a little blue lighting was going into it, or maybe a little red. And then there must have been some type of lighting underneath of it because it silhouetted the aircraft itself. I went around and started doing a 360 walk around the area, taking, recording my observations. I was looking underneath the craft like that. I had taken quite detailed notes on that. Type of aircraft still unknown. No apparent landing gear. No sound, but appears to be pulsating somehow.
Yeah, it was pretty nerve-wracking. I mean, there's something there right in front of you, you don't know what it is.
I would go ahead and feel the craft, which was warm. There was static electricity in the air. Very warm to touch. Identifying markings are on left front side. As I came around to the one side of the craft, there was etching on the facing me just above the center part of the craft itself. Of course, this is done all freehand as I was walking around the craft, but these symbols ran from left to right across, and then underneath that line of symbols was this, which is triangular, and some type of circle here, some type of circle here, and a larger circle here. And of course, all this was filled in with the etching part of it.
I was curious about the symbols that Jim Peniston copied in his logbook. I had these symbols enlarged and then showed them to cryptologist and mathematician George Daglish. I wanted to know if he had any ideas as to what they might mean.
The first symbol looks to me like a vessel with a steering oar afloat in some sort of medium. The second symbol looks like a glyph associated with a mathematical idea known as the Fibonacci series, which is found everywhere in nature. And this is what we have here. The root of a Fibonacci series, 1, 2, and 3, taken as a whole. It's a rather clever glyph, all in one.
Mr. Dagler stressed that this was only speculation, but I found his interpretations quite interesting, especially since I've always heard that the only universal language would be mathematics.
From that glyph.
So this is the last glyph, and how did you decipher this?
They could represent an apse in an orbit, a perigee or an apogee. And if they are apses, apogees and perigees, it means that the orbiter is doing a highly precessive orbit, like that. So if you were going to survey a planet, and this is an orbiter, I assume, which would be a very sensible arrangement if you were using the vehicle as a surveying vehicle, because you would get a maximum look at the planet. I don't think they were trying to send us a metaphysical message about the beauty of life or the reason for the universe or anything like that, or their own existence. I think it's just more a utilitarian marking so that they knew what craft they were dealing with.
I knew that that craft could not have been made by man. And then it started moving back in between the trees with absolutely no sound, no air disturbance at all. Take off. Unknown speed, and I write, impossible.
I mean, it was threatening to me, but it wasn't the type that you were going to shoot on it. And also the fact was that, what would happen if I would have shot at him? What good would it have done?
That night, over 80 Air Force personnel, all trained observers assigned to the 81st Security Police Squadron, witnessed the takeoff. The information acquired during that investigation was reported through my military channels. The team and witnesses were told to treat the investigation as top secret. Thank you.
As the deputy base commander, Colonel Charles Holt was in charge of the investigation when he too became a witness.
In late December 1980, I was called upon to investigate a very strange event, an event that was distracting our security police from their primary duties.
I believe that he went out there to debunk the whole situation, and I think he got in the middle of a situation he couldn't explain either.
2 nights later at the family Christmas party, I was interrupted by the on-duty police commander. He told of strange events and said it was back. Since my boss had to present awards, I was tasked to go out and investigate. I fully expected to find an explanation. During this entire event, I was fortunate to have with me my small pocket recorder. It's a little in there.
What you're about to hear are excerpts from the original recording made that night.
There's no doubt about it. There's some type of strange flashing red light ahead. It's yellow. I saw a yellow tinge in it too. Weird. Now we've got an object about 10 degrees directly south, 10 degrees off the horizon. And the ones in the north are moving, one's moving away from us. Moving out fast.
This one on the right heading away too.
Yeah, we're both heading north. Okay, here he comes from the south. He's coming toward us now.
One approached at a very high speed and sent down a strange beam right at our feet.
Now we're observing what appears to be a beam coming down to the ground. This is unreal.
Another object sent down beams of light into the weapons storage area. The whole time we had difficulty communicating with the base, as all 3 radio frequencies that we were using kept breaking up. I have no idea what we saw that night, but I do know with great certainty it was under intelligent control.
Five-star Admiral Lord Hill Norton had been pressuring Parliament to provide clear answers on this case. I wanted to know if he believed a UFO actually landed at a U.S. airbase in England.
That is one explanation, that it actually happened, as Colonel Holt reported. The other explanation is that it didn't. And in that case, one is bound to assume that Colonel Holt and all his men were hallucinating.
The British Ministry of Defence's position is that nothing of any defense interest took place. This position was strongly criticized by the Admiral.
That the colonel of an American Air Force base in Suffolk and his merry men are hallucinating when there are nuclear-armed aircraft on the base must be of defense interest. If indeed what he says took place did take place, and why on earth should he make it up, then surely the entry of a vehicle from outer space, certainly not man-made, to a defense base in this country also cannot fail to be of defense interest.
Outside the Parliament building, I met with Nick Pope. He investigated UFOs officially for the British government.
I reopened the case and conducted a sort of cold case review of the original investigation, and I was shocked to find a series of basic errors had been committed, exactly the same sorts of errors that often fatally undermine a police investigation.
Nick Pope shared with me some startling evidence from the Ministry of Defence's files.
This is one of the most important documents to have emerged from the MOD's case files. It's from an assistant director in DI 52. This is their assessment of the radiation readings that Colonel Holt and his team took at the landing site.
What we have here is a plaster cast of one of the three indentations the object that Jim and the other two gentlemen approached. It's approximately 8 to 10 inches across and about 3 inches deep at the maximum point. This is cast number 2. He made an impression of all 3 of the indentations and they were all identical.
Now, here's the key bit. These levels seem significantly higher than the average background. And in fact, and I double-checked this with some other government scientists, it's about 8 times normal. So this is absolute proof positive from the MOD's own documentation that something extraordinary happened.
Back in America, I arranged a meeting between Colonel Holt and Sergeant Nevels, one of the men who was with him that night.
Well, I don't believe it.
Come on, sir. How are you doing today?
It's been a long time.
Long.
These men shared an extraordinary experience, one that puzzles them to this day.
Still wobble a little bit, but I make it.
I was glad to have brought them together after 28 years.
If you've been there and done that, it's a whole lot different than the skeptics that we sometimes run around with, and they can't believe us. And
a lot of the other people that were involved, especially Peniston and Burroughs and all, have had all kinds of complications and career problems.
I did too.
Peniston retired as a tech sergeant and probably should have made chief.
There's no doubt about it. There's some type of strange flashing red light ahead.
Step by step, Colonel Holt and Sergeant Nevels went over what happened that night.
It's brighter than it has been. Still, it's coming this way. It is definitely coming this way.
What was going on right there?
It was approaching us.
Yep. No way of calculating how fast it was going. It was just gone.
The turns were 90-degree turns. They were just abrupt.
Right, and there's no way that anything we had in technology then, and I don't believe the technology we have today, would allow anything that we saw to make the turns the way they turned.
We met with General Gordon Williams, the wing commander of the entire base. He would neither confirm nor deny the incident. He did, however, tell us how he felt about a leaked memo written by Deputy Base Commander Colonel Charles Holt.
That went under the door and I didn't see it. Now, did he have a motivation in doing that? Did he think that if he brought it into me, I would have stepped on it? I certainly would have looked at it very carefully because it had some things in there that I don't think we were prepared to defend. Once that cat was out of the bag, you know, I couldn't put Humpty Dumpty back together again, and it lived its own life.
I just find this very interesting that the U.S. Air Force or government generally says that they don't investigate UFOs since the termination of Blue Book, and yet you're convinced that there was an investigation that took place. So who gave the orders to do that?
It certainly didn't come from anybody that was normally on the base other than the OSI.
I didn't tell my wife. I didn't tell my daughter. I had a top secret clearance, and when I was told to shut up, I shut up.
去る11月17日、日航貨物機がアンカレッジで UFO を目撃した。そしてその事実が1ヶ月後、共同通信により新聞各紙に発表された。
What I'm about to tell you is about an event that never happened.
For an event that never happened, FAA official John Callahan certainly has a lot of evidence.
They brought the voice tapes.
He kept audio recordings between the cockpit and the tower as the incident unfolded. He has 30 minutes of taped radar that confirms the UFO, a chart that documents all the objects in the 747's flight path, and the official FAA report.
Event that never happened.
According to Callahan, all of this was presented to the CIA in a private meeting.
When the pilot first reported the UFO, he described it as a huge ball with lights running around it. He said it was about 4 times bigger than the 747 he was riding. And remember, the 747 has an elevator. And he's looking out the window and he sees something that's 4 times the size of his aircraft.
What you're about to see and hear are excerpts from the actual radar and cockpit conversations as the incident unfolded.
Hit on the radar, approximately 5 miles in trail, your 6 o'clock position. Do you concur? Commander 1628, sir, if you're able to identify the type of aircraft, if you can tell whether it's military or civilian. We cannot identify it's okay. It is what? It is okay, we've lost contact with it now.
2030. We're almost on time. I think we're within 20 seconds or so.
So one time he says it's over here at 12 o'clock and 8 miles, and when the antenna goes by, we see a target there. 10 seconds later, it is now behind him, 6, 7 miles behind him. So it's going from 8 miles out here to 6 or 7 miles back here, really in only 5 or 6 seconds. When I went back to headquarters, I gave Admiral England a quick briefing and showed him the video. He set up a briefing with the President Reagan's scientific staff. He told me my function was to hand this operation off to those people. And those people ended up being the CIA, the President's group, a bunch of grunts that came to the meeting. The CIA said to all the people there, this event never happened. We were never here. And you're all sworn to secrecy. We are confiscating all this data. And they did. They took everything that was in the room. In those days, when you printed out something from the computer...
Fortunately, he kept copies of everything back in his office.
That's the end of my speech. Who are you going to believe? Your lying eyes or the government?
And, well, how do you feel about your husband coming forward?
Well, I think that that's John. John is comfortable in what he says and what he does, and that if what he sees, he will tell what he sees, and I don't think anybody is going to tell him that he can't. And I'm proud of him. I think he does a good job, and he's telling the world what it should know.
One of our greatest success stories was getting General Jafari from Iran to D.C. It took 3 months of negotiations to get his visa. Jafari was one of 2 Iranian fighter pilots ordered to intercept a UFO hovering over Tehran, Iran in 1976.
The pilot in the first jet lost instrumentation and communication. When he got too close to the brilliant object, so he headed back. About 10 minutes later, they scrambled a second jet which I was piloting.
General Jafari scrambled his F-4 Phantom jet to get a closer look.
There's
He gave us this Iranian Air Force reenactment film featuring the original witnesses and planes. Even though Jafari's F-4 fighter jet was traveling at the speed of sound, it was nowhere near fast enough.
Imagine, when I was looking here at about 70 miles out, and he jumps all of a sudden 10 degrees to my right. In this angle, 10 degrees, this part which it was traveling becomes about 26.7 miles per moment. I don't say per second, maybe less than a second.
Jafari was flying towards the UFO when a smaller object separated from it and headed right at him. His only instinct was to shoot at it. But that turned out to be a bad idea.
All the instruments were fluctuating with the garblings and the radio, so I was really frightened. So I decided to turn away, and I said, if it comes closer than about 4 miles, I will jump out. So,
having maneuvered away from the object, Jafari's control panel returned to normal, and he regained contact with the tower. Despite the United States government's claim that they have not investigated UFOs since the closing of Project Blue Book in 1969, this Defense Intelligence Agency report, made in 1976, indicates otherwise. It was obtained through the Freedom of Information Act. So you think the reason why they're not telling us is because they can't trust everyone?
They can't trust, and the second one, maybe as I said, they don't want people to be panicked.
Now, we don't take sides on 360. We like to present you with facts and information from different angles and let you make up your own minds about things. That's particularly true with mysteries. And for many Americans, there's no mystery greater than UFOs. James Fox helped organize today's UFO-related event in Washington. He joins me now, along with astronomer, former Air Force pilot and skeptic, James McGahey. Thanks for being with us, both of you. Why should, what this panel is calling for essentially is some sort of government investigation of it. Why shouldn't there be further investigation?
Well, there have been investigations, and it was... Well, hang on a second. Let me just state this clearly. One of the things you keep interrupting me, sir, please. One of the things I want to mention very quickly is that the official position from the Air Force is that they terminated Project Blue Book in 1969, and there have been no official investigations since then. However, we found evidence to suggest the contrary on a number of cases. In Tehran, the general said the Americans were making discreet inquiries about the case there, as well as Bentwaters, England. The colonel said that the OSI came in and investigated that case.
So you believe there is a government investigation going on, you just want it more public?
They're making discreet inquiries, unofficially, yes.
Well, UFOs are basically a modern space-age mythology. It's a conspiracy wrapped in superstition and myth.
Where does this superstition and myth come from? And how could it be so pervasive?
Within a few months of the original saucer report, practically everyone in America was conscious of flying saucers.
Oh, there's an alien who's trying to kill me.
Oh! Now, did you see a UFO?
I did, and the rest of the account, it was unidentified flying object, okay? It's like, and so, wait, we're just getting started.
You've got to be kidding. And then I would say, where was it? What did it look like? What were you doing? How much had you had before you saw it?
It was probably some other satellite or a fast-moving airplane that they saw. I wouldn't believe them.
I mean, I know there's been sightings, random, not well documented.
Well, Jay Leno once asked, if these extraterrestrials are so highly evolved, how come it is that they only address people named Bubba who are out hunting and fishing?
Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. My name is Wilfried de Brouwer. I'm a retired Major General of the Belgian Air Force, and I was Chief Operations in the Air Staff at the time that an exceptional UFO wave took place over Belgium.
The nature of this sighting was such that people identify a large triangular platform with very intensive spotlights and also hovering, being static at a certain moment, being able to fly at very low speeds and then accelerating to very high speeds in seconds. In addition, these objects didn't make any noise. It was only a humming noise.
Were there ever any inquiries from the American government to the Belgian Air Force regarding unidentified flying objects?
Yes. Well, some informal inquiries, but nothing formal. I would have liked to see a formal request. But some people came to my office and asked about this phenomenon and also what we thought about it. And asked to have a copy of a video which was taken by one of the aircraft which tried to intercept one of these objects. And I said, yes, you can have a copy, providing there is a formal request. And we never received a formal request.
Hello, 544, Roger. I do have a primary contact now.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for coming this morning. My name is Ray Bowyer, and I fly a civilian airliner as captain. I've been invited here due to my sighting last April of multiple as yet unidentified objects over the Channel Islands region of the English Channel.
Thanks for joining us. Pilots and aircraft passengers have confirmed sightings of a large unidentified flying object off the coast of Guernsey. The mysterious shapes were spotted earlier in the week and are described as a long, motionless object that measured up to a mile wide.
Hello, 544, zone plus message.
Do you have any traffic, can't really say how far, but by 12 o'clock level? Roger, I've got a very bright object, well, it wouldn't say how far, extremely bright, yellow-orange object, straight ahead, very flat platform. We're looking at it through binoculars as we speak.
Hello, 544, Roger, I do have a primary contact now, very faint primary contact, just to the left, probably you're 11 o'clock this time, in a range of about 4 trap miles.
Roger. I've got a definite contact by 12 o'clock. Very bright yellow object looking, well, like a cigar.
Jersey Bladder 832, the zone asked us to look if we could see an object which is being seen by A-line at the moment. We've got something about 8 o'clock resembling the description.
Roger, and 832, Roger, what range would you estimate that target?
Around about the similar range to Albany from us now.
Well, looking through binoculars as I am now, there's a second one just appeared behind the first one from where I am. Roger, 544, just confirming that all the passengers can see this aircraft. I've got the island visual, it's dead ahead, can't say how far, probably 5 miles, but it's down the same size. Looks to be off the north-northwest coast of Albany.
A-line 544, Roger, would you like descent?
Please, I better go down, I think.
544, Roger, descend to altitude 2,000 feet, the QNH is 1021.
2,000 feet, 1021, it's very plain to see from where I am now, without any binoculars.
Were you scared?
I wasn't too happy, put it that way. I was quite glad to get on the ground and have a cup of tea.
We flew to Guernsey, an island off the northwest coast of France, to get some first-hand testimony where the sighting took place. Here, we met with Captain Ray Bowyer and 2 of his passengers.
We're travelling back from Southampton to Albany in the Trylender. I had noticed Ray looking out through the windscreen with his binoculars, which is quite unusual.
I saw Ray turn around and talk to someone behind him while we were flying. Now, it wasn't worrying from the standpoint of flying, but it was unusual. And he was gesturing to something down below.
On nearing the object, a second identical shape appeared beyond the first. Both objects were of a flattened disc shape with a dark area to the right. They were brilliant yellow with light emanating from within, and I estimated them to be up to possibly a mile across.
I pointed it out to John. He had to lean across me to be able to see it.
It was like that.
This was a big object in the sky, very, very big object. And I didn't want to be too close to it. So it was at that time anyway where we had to descend to land. And with both objects still visible and a lot of the passengers in the back of the aircraft, we descended through the 2,000-foot haze layer and lost sight of it.
So Ray, why didn't you bring this to the attention of your passengers? I mean, normally when a pilot sees something of interest, he says, if you look out to your left, you'll see...
Yeah, New York.
Right, you know what I mean?
It was a little bit far away from it. Well, it was, I didn't want to alarm anybody at that point. There again, as we got closer to these objects, there was no hiding it. They were just there. Take a note of some of the differences between the British and the US reporting system. It appears that attitudes on opposite sides of the Atlantic are very different when it comes to the required reporting and recording of this type of event. I would have been shocked if I was told that the CIA in UK would obstruct an investigation, or if the CIA told me that what I had seen was something entirely different. But it seems that pilots in America are used to this sort of thing here.